I just wanted to ask you, so I recently read in the news that Canada, not the entire Canada, but a large percentage of Canada has banned altcoins. So I was just wondering, as someone who's a DeFi expert, what you think about that and how people have been
Yeah.
upset about that. They're like, well, I can use the money that I'm getting from banks to buy cocaine. So why is that okay, but I can't do altcoins, So
It's really interesting,
yeah.
right? There's so many different avenues of that. Like one factor being just at an overall level, money laundering. The United Nations has put out documentation showing that money laundering is 2 to 5% of global GDP, as opposed to Chainalysis doing their report showing that 0.15% as of 2021 activity in the blockchain space is related to illicit activity, scams, and rug pulls, and I guess other bad kind of things going on. So when you look at it that way, it's like, well, why are we going so hard against crypto? But when you look at also OFAC and the things that they did there against Tornado Cash, it doesn't help that DeFi was lazy. It doesn't help that we enabled bad actors, bad nation states like North Korea get access to
Right.
$1 billion of funds,
Yeah.
650 from the Ronin chain, which is part of Axie Infinity, the game. The fact that we weren't policing ourselves well enough, I feel like if we don't do something as a community to protect ourselves and to have, we have consumer action groups across the rest of society. There's a group here in Australia called Choice. There's other consumer action groups. Because we don't have enough of that in DeFi, there are things out there like RugDoc. There's Immunify, which is all for bug bounties and trying to find like where code is not working and stuff to help prevent bad things happening. I feel like we're going to see more of that kind of stuff, those actions from Canada banning altcoins. And just
Right.
because the regulators, they have only got the tools that they can use right now to try to prevent harm happening to citizens.
So
And
do you agree with it, or?
I don't necessarily agree. I think that regulators need to understand, and I'll give you an example of what's kind of happening here in Australia. But when people said the whole OFAC thing, it's freedom of speech, freedom of code.
Yeah.
In Australia, we don't have a freedom of speech kind of thing. So
You
it's
don't? Oh, okay.
it's a bit different. I think we've got something, but it's not I can't remember exactly what it is. Not as ingrained in the Constitution as what you've got there, but sorry, in the US.
In the US.
But freedom of speech, a lawyer that we've been speaking to was saying, well, you've got freedom of speech. I can create an artwork and put it up on screen, but there's no harm. It's just words. If you don't want to look at it, don't look at it. But when you have code can turn into something people take action on.
Yeah.
It becomes conduct.
Right.
Because of that, it's not such a clear, as easy, even though there is the precedent about the freedom to code thing. And obviously that's going to be looked at whilst this poor guy is in jail. But because of all of that, it's not so easy to say, well, we should just have freedom to code. I do feel like we should. And I know it's going to be triggering for people, but the reason why I feel that the regulators, whether it's in Canada or whatever OFAC did, and there's this list, and they're like, well, they never put code on this list. It's only been people, right? You don't put code on the list. It's not meant for that. Well, they needed to do something. They could have done it later for sure, but regulators are going to use the tools at hand to take actions that they feel are necessary to help protect people. Is it always going to be right? People might argue it's dumb regulation and stuff, but regulation, I think unless we do something ourselves, we're going to continue to see this. I don't like it. I want more freedom out there, but I definitely see why they had to do that. And that's why DeFi was lazy. Now it's a bear market. We need to build better. It's not just about building better infrastructure to, hey, let's have this thing that better invests and have this thing that makes it easier for people to trade. It needs to be more about how do we put in the guardrails so that we don't get the type of policies
Right.
that
And it's not
punish
the
us.
sexiest part of
It's
Web3 or
not.
DeFi at all. So,
Yeah.
who's it up to, so.
That's the hard thing.
Yeah.
But certainly what we've seen in this space is it is open to opportunistic people to see an opportunity like this to build. This is the opportunity we've got right now. Regulators are going to come in and go and clamp down hard on us unless we do better. Whether it's in Canada, you'll hear another country soon, I'm sure.
Yeah. And for us in the US, with the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, people often say, as a debate, they're like, well, those people who are running the SEC, they don't know anything about crypto and they don't
Yeah.
know anything about NFTs. Why are these old people controlling what we can do? Do you guys feel that way in Australia as well?
It's so funny,
Do you
right?
need people who are knowledgeable
Yeah.
in DeFi to be in those positions? Do they have to be? I don't know.
So two
Yeah.
things. Like one being that it's interesting that in the SEC you had Gary Gensler,
Yeah.
who taught Bitcoin at MIT, and his videos are still out there, and people still learn about Bitcoin from him. And
Oh,
they
wow.
expected that as soon as he was made the SEC chair, that he was going to be pro Bitcoin, pro everything.
No.
But he's not,
Mhm.
because they've got the rules. And like
Mm.
ETFs, for example, we've not had a spot Bitcoin type ETF. It's all been based off futures and other things there. But it's just that they've not hit the requirements that they've needed at the SEC. And maybe there's others in the SEC that don't understand it as much. And going back to here, and I don't, like we don't experience it, so we don't know as much as there. And we've got a lot of lawyers that are part of the community here in Australia, which is great because this is all about the law and regulation. Here in Australia, we're really lucky because we have these government consultations. The most recent one earlier this year was all about this is how we're going to regulate the space. And we as the public got to communicate our thoughts about
Oh,
how
and
we
give
thought,
input.
give
Oh.
input. Now, whether they decide to use that or not, it's up to them. But they listen because a lot of the majority of people were saying that based on what they've defined, we think that we haven't even got the definitions right in this paper. So what we need to do is get the better definitions. So what's happened recently, I think it was announced this week or last week, the government here is going to go down the path of a token mapping
I
exercise.
did see that. Yes.
So
Yes.
because of that,
Yes.
it means that we get to have a say in terms of, because not every token is meant to be a security. Not every token is going to have value. It's almost like we need to look at tokens in different ways so that we can regulate them based on what it is that they do, whether it's we're regulating the outcome, does it do harm or not, or we're regulating how they're created. But the point is that we're still very early. We're going to see what it is the government does here. And I think that we're doing it the right way, and I hope other nations follow suit, but we'll see.
As a community leader, do you feel like you're being extended like over 100 directions then?
Yeah.
Because then you want to give info, but you want to do education, but you want to do your podcast, but you want to do your panels, but you also
Yeah.
want to help with projects and you have your own thing going. It's like you just want to
Is
clone
it
yourself.
only 100? Yeah, there's
Maybe it's like a million.
it's something like that.
Yeah.
It's good that we've got partners that help
Right.
out with things. More and more, we're getting people to help out running the association and doing things here. But in terms of the venture studio, which is what I'm wearing, not
Not
centralized, so
centralized.
there's the shill. Everything that we do is under not centralized, and under that umbrella, we run the community. We work on our own projects and we work on other people's projects. So, first of all, like we had to take a big step back because we were doing all these actions, but they weren't connected. And under not centralized, they're connected. And then it was about finding the right partners where we could farm out projects too, because there's only 24 hours in a day. Even though DeFi feels like it's 30 hours in a day, but there's
I think
only
that's
such
why the
limited
time
time.
goes by so quickly.
It's
So
ridiculous.
you're able to just connect everything and make it all under this not centralized umbrella. Then.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's how we do it, and we're still learning. It's still a great big experiment, but we're further ahead than we ever could have been if we were going about it in a Web 2 way. It's much more open and collaborative, and it's all about building the community. And we have these opportunities that we never would have had we not tried to create this thing where we've got an environment, especially the place we're in now, where everyone can come together and give their input. So it's amazing.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And welcome back. And we've got a special here because we've got another hot take from Ash on the whole Canada situation.
Sure. So preface this, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a Canadian, so not really an expert on this. But I think if it plays out right, what happened in Canada is a really, really good thing, right? If you say, we're going to look at the coins, and I think this is where Australia is going as well, right? We're going to look at all the different coins out there, and we can say, these ones are less risky. So we're going to white list them and say, mom and pop on the street, you can invest in these ones if you want to. It's still crypto, it's still medium risk or higher risk than normal.
Yeah.
But these are okay. That kind of opens up a lot
Mainstream.
of opportunity
Yeah.
for mainstream, right?
Yeah.
So now you can have people who are like worried about, can I, my grandchild bought this dog thing. Can I buy the dog thing? And then, they want to be cool and everything. And so now they buy the dog thing and it goes up and they're like, wow. And then they lose all their money and they're like, oh, crap. But now the government's saying like, hey, invest in these things. They're more stable. There's value being provided, etc. It's an easy entry.
Yeah.
The way I
That's true.
understand the legislation is that it's not an absolute ban on the altcoins, but it's saying that
There are
for
certain
licensed
exceptions.
exchanges,
Yeah.
this is what you're allowed to sell to the public, right? So if you want to go and transfer that money to a MetaMask and buy an altcoin on a DEX, on an AMM, there's nothing that stops you from doing that. But for
Interesting.
licensed exchanges, they're saying, hey, let's not expose the general public to riskier assets.
Because most people would go through a license exchange.
Right, and they
Right.
wouldn't go through all
first.
that work around just to get Dogecoin.
Yeah. And if they do, maybe they know what they're
Yeah,
doing.
that
kind
means
of
they
thing.
know what they're doing, which
Exactly.
is what
So
you're saying.
the opportunity is
Mm.
for it to go way south, but I
Yep.
think that it's an indicator of where we're going to in Australia, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
With the token mapping exercise.
exactly, we map all the tokens. What do? Like, what's the one thing that they're going to say to people who are thinking about, like, do I put this in my retirement fund or do I put this in a savings account?
Pension funds and
Or
stuff here.
people are saying I should buy this new crypto thing.
Yeah.
Hey, USDC, stake it for 6% interest. That's safe. And I think that's kind of what the token mapping will bring us.
It's interesting because like over here, so even globally, right? Like seeing things like the big crash around like Celsius and
Yeah.
the US, the Terra Luna and stuff,
Mhm.
20% was seen as safe because in retrospect, it was like, well, compared to 1,000% APY for some other things, it's like it looks safe, but I think we need to look at it from an overall perspective. There's still risks and stuff in the space. So that's a really interesting take that, from the other side, this can be seen as a good thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry.
No,
Keep quiet.
No, I like it, but on OFAC and stuff as well. Like I feel like this is a moment in time where either this is the wake up call that we needed, or it is the worst thing that happened to crypto. It's going to be one of those two things. But the point is, right now, it's up to us to get out the message, to build the right things, to do the right things, so that we don't get taken down and we can actually use this, because we see how innovative this space is around blockchain tech and what it can do. We need to make sure that we do things in the right way so that we don't get shut down, because we've seen how quickly things can get shut down. So it's a bit scary, but I think nothing happens unless we're scared. So
it's also an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And I want to do a hat tip to P. Marker on that kind of thinking. He went on a podcast and explained how early we are in crypto, and he related it to the first days of the internet. And they made the decision to go with text-based protocols for websites. And what that did was take up a lot of bandwidth. So everybody's websites were dog slow, but
Yeah.
people using the text-based stuff was really easy to develop. And so it made really pretty websites that's really functional, but it was dog slow. That created problems. What did those problems lead to? Faster internet, because everybody was complaining about the internet. They didn't want crappier websites. They want the great websites delivered faster. So even with the OFAC thing, it's creating problems, but those problems are opportunities for innovation.
Absolutely.
Did they do a knee-jerk reaction? Is it like completely vague? Another podcast to listen to, Unchained.
Yeah, I think I've heard of them. Yeah.
I've heard of them too.
So their most recent episode, they talk about this, and they've got some great legal minds on the podcast. And the big ambiguity is that there's no clear path. So in fiat,
Yeah.
when something goes on the OFAC list and someone from an OFAC list sends you money, there's a process to go take that money, put it in a segregated account, contact OFAC. There's a process for it. But they made this ruling, there's no clear process. And so we're all in this limbo, and now the whole world is like waiting to find out like
What happens next?
what's going to happen. Like they have to give us a process to deal with it.
Yeah.
Because without it, everything's stuck. But it's such a mind shift because there's not this whole. And I tweeted about this. My favorite call out from that podcast was like, my wallet gets hacked.
Yep.
And they send funds to Tornado Cash. Now my wallet,
Yeah.
my wallet gets blocked, right? Then somebody sends me illicit funds. Now my wallet is blocked.
Yeah.
It's not even possible for me to segregate those funds because my wallet is blocked. You don't in the fiat world, you don't have your account locked. The funds get segregated.
Yeah, it's
You
different,
get that
isn't
separation.
it? That's interesting.
And that whole process is missing. There's no guidance on that. And even the person who was arrested, they weren't arrested by American authorities. They weren't.
Holland, yeah.
Yeah, and sure, in America, you've got code is free speech that's got the precedence, but nobody knows why that person got arrested in Holland. They're not under OFAC jurisdiction. Like there's so much happening at the moment, and everybody's sort of waiting for that finality, for people to give clarity on what is actually happening. And once we have that, whether it is terrible for a lot of protocols out there or good, doesn't matter. It'll adapt. Crypto is so fast moving. Like if a bank was to go through this, they'd go extinct, right? They'd all close down, close shop. But in Web3, 3 weeks and the solution will be on the market.
Exactly.
Right?
Like give it a week and we'll solve it or whatever. Like, so I think that we're going to see a lot more insights and innovation over the next couple of weeks and couple of months. It's going to be crazy, but we're, certainly at the early stages, I think, of where we're at. So it's good to be a builder in the space, and it must be really good being a journo and seeing all the insights too. So,
Thank you.
As a journo, you asked the question, but are you allowed to give an opinion? What do you think about the Canada thing?
I think I'm on a podcast. It should be fine. But if I was like professionally, I would just say, well, I see this side and I see this side, and they both have good points.
yeah.
Well, your hot take, I didn't even really think about it that deeply. And so after you shared yours, I think that's a really good point as well. But I don't know if that will lead to mainstream adoption. Maybe people will just be like, I just want to stay away from all of those altogether, instead of like saying, oh, these are the bad ones and these are the good ones. So I think we would have to see how that goes first.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting time. I think legislation, worldwide governance, in the next 2 years, these things have to be sorted out. Like they can't turn a blind eye to crypto. There's just too much money flowing through it.
There's pressure on them.
Too much utility. Yeah. They're going to have to figure it out. There will be some knee-jerk reactions. But I think we stand a better chance of success if there's more people who have a collaborative approach. Like in Australia.
Australia, yes.
Where there's actual like consultation and talking to each other, as opposed to, there's a couple of crypto projects that I know that people have like immediately used this opportunity to go like, okay, cool, I'm going full anon. Like being a total anon indeed in the crypto space,
it's dangerous.
It's not the way forward.
It's not, because no one will trust you.
We have to bring these things out into the light and solve the problems. It's sad that people have to go anonymous.
It is. I think that's probably another episode that we'll get into. So we'll probably have to cut off from there for now before we get kicked out of the studio. But Ash, love the hot take, and we're definitely going to get more of that as we do more of these podcasts. And Erika, thank you for
Thank you so much.
Awesome question.
It was great. Yeah, no, that led to a lot of things.
Yeah, no worries. Anytime. All right, we'll see you guys again soon.